Owning your home outright is widely seen as the ultimate financial milestone. No mortgage, no monthly payment, no lender. For many Americans, a paid off house represents security, discipline, and success. But over time, this belief can quietly create a financial problem that is hard to reverse. The issue is not homeownership itself. The issue is how a paid off house functions inside a long term financial system. Most people assume that eliminating the mortgage automatically improves their financial position. Cash flow feels better, stress goes down, and the balance sheet looks stronger. From a short term emotional perspective, this is true. From a long term financial perspective, it is often incomplete and sometimes harmful. Here is why. A paid off house converts a large portion of your net worth into an illiquid, non income producing asset. That capital is locked. It does not generate cash flow, it cannot be easily accessed without cost, and it does not automatically adjust to inflation. While the house may appreciate over time, appreciation alone does not pay bills, fund retirement, or cover rising expenses. Consider a common scenario. A homeowner pays off a $400,000 house by age 55. On paper, net worth increases, monthly expenses drop, but that $400,000 is now sitting in an asset that produces no income. Meanwhile, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and repairs continue. In many U.S. markets, these ongoing costs can easily run $8,000, $12,000 per year, and they tend to rise over time. Now compare this to an alternative structure. If even part of that $400,000 were allocated to income-generating assets, earning a modest 4% annually, it could produce $16,000 per year before tax. That income could cover housing costs, supplement retirement savings, or reduce the need to draw down other investments. The difference is not theoretical. Term flexibility. The mistake most people make is assuming that a paid-off house reduces risk across the board. In reality, it reduces one specific risk, monthly mortgage payments, but increases others. Liquidity risk rises, income risk rises, concentration risk rises. A large share of wealth becomes tied to a single asset in a single location with limited optionality. This problem often remains invisible for years. As long as income is strong, the system appears to work. The issue surfaces later, typically in the years leading up to or during retirement. At that point, accessing home equity usually means selling, downsizing, borrowing against the property, or relying on reverse mortgages, none of which are frictionless or guaranteed to align with market conditions. Data supports this pattern. Many American retirees are house-rich but cash-poor. According to Federal Reserve surveys, a significant portion of older households hold the majority of their net worth in home equity while having limited liquid assets. This imbalance reduces financial resilience, especially during periods of inflation or rising healthcare costs. The key misunderstanding is equating net worth with financial usability. A paid-off house increases net worth, but it does not automatically increase financial capacity. Without sufficient income-producing assets alongside it, long-term outcomes can suffer. This does not mean paying off a house is always wrong. It means that treating a paid-off house as an unqualified financial win ignores how money actually works over time. Before discussing solutions, it is essential to recognize the structural mismatch between perceived security and long-term financial flexibility. To understand why a paid-off house can create long-term financial strain, it helps to look at how most households structure their finances and how behavior changes once the mortgage is gone. The issue is not irrationality. It is the interaction between income patterns, psychological comfort, and the absence of a broader system. For most Americans, housing is the largest financial decision they ever make. Over decades, they are taught that eliminating debt is the ultimate goal. As income grows, extra cash is often directed toward accelerating mortgage payments rather than building parallel income-producing assets. This feels logical because the mortgage is visible, measurable, and emotionally uncomfortable. Investment returns, by contrast, are uncertain and fluctuate. Once the house is paid off, behavior shifts. Monthly cash flow improves, but instead of being systematically redeployed, the freed up cash often gets absorbed by lifestyle expansion, higher discretionary spending, or unstructured saving. Without a defined plan, the financial benefit of owning the house outright slowly dissolves. Consider a realistic example. A couple in their early 50s finishes paying off a $500,000 home. Their mortgage payment of $2,500 per month disappears. They feel financially done, but they do not redirect that $30,000 per year into investments. Instead, some goes to travel, some to home upgrades, some to general spending. 10 years later, their home is still worth roughly what it was in real terms, but their liquid assets are limited. They reduced one obligation without building a replacement income stream. Another scenario highlights the structural issue more clearly. Two households have identical income and net worth at age 45. Household A aggressively pays down the mortgage and owns the home outright by 55. Household B maintains a low-rate mortgage and invests surplus cash into a diversified portfolio, earning a modest long-term return. By retirement, Household B holds both home equity and a significant investment portfolio generating income. Household A holds mainly home equity. The difference is not discipline or income, it is system design. Standard advice often reinforces this imbalance. Phrases like, your house is your biggest asset, or being debt free is financial freedom, are incomplete. They focus on ownership but ignore function. An asset's value depends not only on its price, but on how it contributes to cash flow, liquidity, and optionality over time. Another commonly cited argument is safety. A paid-off house is viewed as protection against uncertainty. In practice, it introduces rigidity. If unexpected expenses arise, accessing home equity requires borrowing or selling. Both depend on market conditions and credit availability at exactly the wrong time. Inflation adds another layer. While homes may appreciate nominally, maintenance, taxes, and insurance rise as well. These costs must be paid in cash. Without income-producing assets, the homeowner is forced to rely on savings or employment longer than planned. The deeper problem is that home equity is treated as a plan rather than a component. A house is shelter, not a retirement strategy. Without a system that converts cash flow into diversified, productive assets alongside homeownership, long-term financial flexibility erodes quietly. Recognizing this gap is critical. The goal is not to reject homeownership, but to understand its limitations. Without that clarity, standard advice leads people to concentrate wealth where it feels safest, while unknowingly reducing their future options. The long-term financial issues tied to a paid-off house are not caused by home ownership itself, but by a set of common structural mistakes. These mistakes are widespread because they align with conventional wisdom, even though their long-term consequences are rarely calculated. The first mistake is overconcentration in a single illiquid asset. When a house represents 50–70% of total net worth, the household becomes highly exposed to one location, one market, and one asset type. This concentration limits flexibility. Over a 10-year period, a diversified portfolio earning a conservative 4 or 5% can materially increase purchasing power. A house that merely keeps pace with inflation does not. Over 20 years, the difference compounds. A $400,000 asset growing at 2% real appreciation reaches about $595,000. The same $400,000 invested at a 4% real return grows to roughly $875,000. The gap is not caused by income or effort, but by where capital is placed. The second mistake is confusing net worth with usable income. A paid-off house increases net worth on paper, but it does not produce cash flow. Meanwhile, expenses continue. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and repairs typically consume 1–3% of home value annually. On a $500,000 home, that is $5,000–$15,000 per year. Over 10 years, these costs easily exceed $100,000, all paid in cash. Without income-producing assets, homeowners are forced to draw from savings or delay retirement. The third mistake is stopping capital redeployment once the mortgage is gone. Many households treat the mortgage payoff as a finish line rather than a transition point. The freed up cash flow is not systematically invested. Over 5 years, failing to invest $2,500 per month at a 5% return costs roughly $170,000 in missed capital accumulation. Over 10 years, the opportunity cost approaches $400,000. This loss does not appear as a bill, which is why it is ignored. Another common error is underestimating liquidity risk. Home equity is not easily accessed without friction. Selling involves timing risk and transaction costs. Borrowing against the home depends on credit conditions and interest rates, which may be unfavorable precisely when liquidity is needed. Over a 20-year horizon, this lack of liquidity reduces the ability to respond to health issues, family needs, or market opportunities. Finally, many people assume higher income offsets these issues. In practice, it does not. A high-income household that concentrates wealth in home equity often underperforms a moderate-income household that maintains a balance between housing and income-producing assets. Returns apply to the full capital base. Income applies only to future savings. The consequences of these mistakes are gradual but decisive. After 5 years, the system feels stable but rigid. After 10 years, the gap between net worth and cash flow becomes obvious. After 20 years, choices narrow. Retirement timing becomes constrained. Spending flexibility declines. The critical point is that none of these outcomes are caused by bad luck or insufficient earnings. They result from decisions that prioritize ownership over functionality. Understanding these mistakes is necessary before discussing solutions because the cost of correcting them increases sharply with time. The solution is not to avoid paying off a house or to reintroduce debt blindly. The solution is to place the house back into a balanced financial system where it serves a clear role instead of absorbing disproportionate capital. This requires treating home equity as one component of wealth, not the foundation of the entire strategy. The first principle is role separation. Housing provides stability and shelter. It does not need to be the primary growth engine or income source. Once this distinction is clear, financial decisions become more objective. The goal is not to maximize home equity, but to ensure that total capital is working across different functions: liquidity, income, and long-term growth. A practical system starts with defining 3 layers. The first layer is liquidity. This includes cash and near cash assets that cover 1 to 2 years of essential expenses, including property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. This layer exists to prevent forced decisions. It ensures that unexpected costs do not require selling assets or borrowing at unfavorable terms. Liquidity reduces stress without locking capital permanently. The second layer is income-producing capital. This is where many homeowners fall short. Income-producing assets include diversified investment portfolios designed to generate long-term returns. These assets do not need to produce immediate cash distributions. Their primary role is to grow and preserve purchasing power. Over time, a modest return of 4 to 5% on invested capital creates optionality. It provides the ability to fund housing costs, healthcare, or lifestyle needs without relying solely on employment or selling property. The third layer is home equity. In this system, home equity is treated as stable but illiquid capital. It contributes to net worth but is not expected to solve cash flow problems. Decisions about accelerating mortgage payoff or retaining a low-rate mortgage are evaluated based on opportunity cost, not ideology. If excess cash can earn a higher long-term return elsewhere while maintaining manageable housing risk, redirecting capital may be rational. Mechanically, this system works through intentional cash flow routing. When mortgage payments end or are reduced, the freed up cash is automatically redirected into income-producing assets. This prevents lifestyle drift and preserves the financial benefit of lower housing costs. Automation is critical. Without it, surplus cash tends to disappear into consumption. Risk is managed through diversification, not leverage. The system does not require aggressive borrowing or speculative investments. It relies on spreading capital across assets with different behaviors. Housing remains stable. Investments handle growth. Cash provides flexibility. No single component is asked to perform every function. This approach is stable because it reduces dependence on any one outcome. If housing prices stagnate, income-producing assets continue to compound. If markets are volatile, liquidity buffers prevent forced selling. If expenses rise, diversified capital provides multiple adjustment paths. Importantly, this is not a short-term optimization strategy. It is a durability strategy. It acknowledges that future conditions are uncertain and builds resilience accordingly. The homeowner is no longer all in on one asset class. The core shift is simple. Move from ownership-focused thinking to system-focused thinking. A paid-off house is not a mistake by itself. The mistake is allowing it to dominate the balance sheet without compensating structures. When home equity is placed in the correct role, financial flexibility improves without increasing overall risk. When the full picture is assembled, the issue becomes clear. A paid-off house is not inherently a problem. The problem is allowing it to dominate the financial system without complementary assets that provide liquidity, income, and flexibility. Once the roles of capital are clearly defined, the long-term risks become manageable. The complete structure is built around three components, each with a specific function. First, liquidity. This includes cash and near-cash assets sufficient to cover 1 to 2 years of essential expenses, including housing-related costs. This layer absorbs shocks and removes pressure from other parts of the system. Its purpose is stability, not return. Second, income and growth capital. This is diversified, invested capital designed to preserve and increase purchasing power over time. It does not rely on a single asset or market. Its role is to support future spending, offset inflation, and provide optionality. Without this component, home ownership becomes financially rigid. Third, home equity. In this structure, the house is treated as stable, non-productive capital. It contributes to net worth, but is not expected to solve cash flow problems. Decisions about paying off a mortgage or maintaining one are evaluated based on opportunity cost and balance, not emotion or ideology. What changes over time is not the structure, but the outcome. After 1 year, the main difference is behavioral. Cash flow that previously disappeared into unplanned spending is now intentionally directed. Financial decisions feel clearer because each dollar has a defined role. Stress decreases, not because risk is eliminated, but because it is controlled. After 5 years, the impact becomes visible. Income-producing assets have grown, liquidity remains intact, and housing costs are covered without strain. The household is less dependent on employment income and better positioned to handle rising expenses. The gap between net worth and usable capital narrows. After 10 years, the difference is substantial. Households that relied primarily on a paid-off home often face limited options, selling, borrowing, or cutting spending. Households that built a balanced system retain flexibility. They can adjust retirement timing, manage healthcare costs, or respond to market changes without being forced into a single path. The steps to implement this are practical and immediate. First, calculate annual essential expenses and define a realistic liquidity target. Second, review current assets and assign each one a role: liquidity, income growth, or housing. Third, identify whether excess capital is concentrated in home equity without sufficient compensating assets. Fourth, redirect surplus cash flow, especially after mortgage payoff, into diversified income-producing investments through automation. Fifth, review the system periodically, focusing on balance rather than maximizing any single metric. This approach does not depend on predicting housing prices, interest rates, or market cycles. It assumes uncertainty and builds resilience accordingly. Risk is not avoided, it is distributed intentionally. The key conclusion is simple. A paid-off house increases net worth, but net worth alone does not fund life. Financial stability over time comes from usable capital, diversified income sources, and liquidity. When home ownership is placed inside a broader system rather than treated as the end goal, it supports long-term security instead of quietly undermining it. The goal is not to undo past decisions. It is to ensure that future decisions are structured, deliberate, and aligned with how money actually works over time.